everyone. It's Nick from DesignWell, and we're back with another episode of the DesignWell podcast talking about air quality. This time, I'll be meeting with Ray Wu, CEO of Wynd, a startup dealing with air monitoring, ventilation, and purification in both residential and commercial settings. But don't let the notion of its startup nature deceive you. Since its inception, the company has become a major leader in the realm of air quality in buildings, not only for the effectiveness of its products, but the ingenuity and intelligence that helps power their more comprehensive solutions. So while we have Ray with us, we'll be exploring some of the science behind Wynd technologies, while we also take a look at current trends and best practices when it comes to deploying air quality solutions within building. And with that, on to the conversation. Thank you for tuning in. If you liked what you saw, be sure to hit the like button on your way out, and also subscribe to DesignWell's YouTube channel and hit the bell icon if you want to stay informed of any new updates. Alternatively, you can find any of our podcasts over on Apple or Spotify and leave a review there. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DesignWell 365 podcast. I'm your host, Nick Bover, editor of DesignWell 365, and today I have with me Ray Wu, CEO of Wynd Technologies. So, Ray, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself to start us off?
Sounds great, and thanks, Nick, for having me on this show. My name is Ray Wu. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a startup called Wynd, spelled W-Y-N-D. We monitor and improve indoor air quality at scale. And I'm happy to dive into more if you'd like.
I was actually going to say, you guys have been in the air quality business for some time, starting off with work in the more commercial sphere, but then you later on adapted your offerings there to the residential setting. And one of the things that I actually got introduced to you guys on, where I first heard about you, was your air quality monitoring with the Air ID. That's like very extensive metric to go by. So if you wanted to just kind of dive into some of those.
Yeah, sure. So at a very high level, the reason why we started this company is I was born in part of the world that suffers from large amounts of air pollution. I was born in Beijing, actually. And the air pollution was so bad that people couldn't go to school, cars couldn't drive on the freeway, airplanes couldn't even land in certain times of the year or certain days. And the thing that really gnawed at me was most of the time people did not know how good or bad the air was. Air was kind of by its very nature mostly invisible, and in many ways the difference between good or bad air is just so subtle that our human senses can't detect it. And so anyway, about 6.5, 7 years ago, when we started Wynd, we got so my friends, we went to school at MIT together, and we designed technologies that can understand what's in the air. And by using that knowledge, by leveraging that knowledge, we can design the appropriate recommendations, the appropriate solutions that then act on it, right? And so you mentioned Air ID. That's kind of our foundational technology. And basically, it started with the question of like, what's in the air? The previous technologies that were made, especially on particles like PM 2.5, things like that, it talks about air pollutants in a super general way, just by size. It doesn't tell you if it's smog from industrial sources or pollen or dander or somebody smoking or even a biological issue, right? What we really worked on developing is still in a very cheap way, an accessible way, figure out how bad the air is, but also what's in there so we can drive the right solutions. And so that kind of sustained us for a long time. And as you mentioned, we got into both residential and commercial buildings. I can talk about kind of our findings in these different places. And obviously the pandemic has had a huge impact on people's understanding and also caring of indoor air quality. So I can talk about our views there and what we learned.
Yeah, because one of the things that kind of like introduced us to one another was the recent study that came out, the Texas A&M study that kind of highlighted something that I don't think a lot of people. I can't say that a lot of people were saying that objectively the office was worse than the home in terms of air quality, but there was definitely kind of like a informational bias going on there where a lot of the conversation centered around how bad the office air is. And so it wasn't really too much of a focus being placed on the home. There was still focus being placed on the home, but like not in the same way that it was being placed in the office. And so I'm kind of wondering, what your thoughts are on that study and just what you guys have found through all the research that you have done.
Yeah, I think the first principle is that air air in each built environment, it could be home, it could be a restaurant, a hotel, a commercial office building, it differs, building by building, home by home, right? And the second first principle is it's really hard for people to figure that out by themselves. We can't really see the air, you can't see the pollutants, you can't hear them, you can't smell them, you can't taste them, unless it's obviously so bad that there's like visible smoke or something. But most of the time it's subtle enough that we can't detect it. And based on that, I think it's kind of intuitive that people in their own home, they just have no idea, right? And the sources of pollutants come from human beings, from processes in the home, including the furnace, and it could be outside pollutants, and most people have no idea, and therefore they haven't maybe maintained that air system in their home as well as they should have. Most people don't even know what their HVAC system is, who made it, when it was installed. They don't replace their filter at the right time. The US government suggests every 3 months in most cases, but I doubt that actually happens in most households. And so, I'm not surprised by the findings that, in for example, PM 2.5 levels are higher and in the home and the office. In the office, in contrast, right? You sort of have professionals managing it. It's their job to know like what system was installed and maintain it well and make sure that filters do get changed from time to time. Although I'm sure it's still maybe in some buildings it doesn't happen as regularly as it should. And during the pandemic, you really didn't have that many people in these buildings. And furthermore, because of the pandemic, in these commercial buildings, people were trying to make them healthy. And so they went to like 100% outside air. They changed the filters to be thicker to capture more particles. And so they have made it healthier for people, right? And so that also drove maybe the difference in what these findings are seeing. Although there are some negative implications as well, and it's probably not sustainable. And I use that word on many levels. Energy spend due to people turning the knob all the way to the right on ventilation, air cycle exchanges, changing the filter. It's just wasting a lot more energy without any kind of modulation based on demand, and that can't continue long term. Otherwise, the systems themselves can't handle it, and it's bad for the planet as well. So there needs to be better knowledge and better intelligence in these buildings.
Now, because you guys manufacture, the air quality monitoring, one of the things that I was wondering was that is there currently capabilities for it to sort of communicate with other, ventilators or HVAC systems, or are there plans for it to be able to do that down the road?
Yeah, definitely. So we can already communicate with building management systems today. And with permission, control the HVAC and basically use our information from our sensors to drive automation of the building. And that can optimize for both people's health as well as energy efficiency, which helps the earth, but also even the bottom line, because basic is less waste, right? It also, the information that we generate from our sensors can also drive better recommendations for layout in a building. If you're a building manager or even an occupier, like are you maybe aggregating too many people in this area? Maybe janitorial service should be targeted in certain spaces, right? Or with Air ID, we detect mold in this area a Marriott hotel, which is one of our customers, that can save them a lot of money before it gets too bad, and this can also improve health outcomes, right? Another example with AID is we're getting into property risk as well. So it's more than just about pure health. Many of our customers in the multifamily space for long-term rentals and even short-term rentals like Airbnb, they don't want people smoking, they don't want people vaping, they don't want people ruining the experience for the next guest, let's call it, or even for the property itself. And traditionally, there's been no way of classifying that, right? Again, it goes back to sensors before us. It's just all very general. Smoke is just a particle, and it would just tell you particles by size. We can tell you exactly what it is, and that could make a big difference also in the realm of keeping properties risk-free or minimizing that risk as well.
And yeah, I know that's definitely a thing that's been coming, that I've been hearing more and more of, just not just the property owners, but the occupants themselves kind of wanting that straightforward information. And I think that's where a lot of the complaints generally stem from, because as we were talking earlier, a lot of professional work has been put into cleaning up the office environment in terms of air quality. But I think a lot of the communication from the consumer side, when it comes to their general concerns about air quality in these office spaces, I figure a lot of it probably stems from the fact that that information that these facility managers and building owners are getting isn't really being communicated towards the people that are occupying those spaces a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. So first of all, some buildings have made a lot of improvements, right? They've done the ventilation upgrades. They switched to much more outside air, which helps dilute any issues, including viruses on the inside. They've upgraded their filters, but people don't see that, right? And they certainly can't detect that it's healthier than a relative other building next door that maybe didn't make those upgrades. And so what we see in the design world and the kind of architectural world is technology is going to become more visible, right? The HVAC system, all that was just kind of taken for granted before. Obviously, if you're too hot, too cold, you complain, or there's a funky smell coming from the corner of the office. But I think more and more people are going to be wanting to see that their hotel, their school, their office, their healthcare facility is taking care of them, and gravitate and reward them with their dollars, frankly. And so technology can be a way to kind of make them comfortable, right? And you mentioned the Las Vegas study. Maybe I can quickly talk about what we found there. Basically, you have this very tiny geographical area where there's 28, 30 hotels, casinos, and the difference between the healthiest and unhealthiest hotel from a concentration of pollutants perspective is 80 times. With the worst basically being you're basically breathing the smog of a top 10 pollution city like New Delhi all day long, right? And the best one being better than Hawaii, better than outside air, right? And the implication of that is enormous, because if I were a consumer, if I were a business traveler, if I were an event planner, I would pay more out of responsibility, right? Out of economic, wellness, to make sure my employees don't get sick and catch COVID. And I would go to those hotels and those establishments that are healthy. And I think technology can be used to, in many ways, reward those places and show confidence to their customers and prospective customers that they are keeping people healthy. I think that's going to really change things a lot in this industry.
And it's definitely something that I've been seeing a lot more of, especially with the well business certification, well, fit well, all of those different types of wellness certifications have really been coming up, not just in terms of, being out there and kind of getting the word out in terms of propagating this idea that, our buildings need to be healthier. But a lot of the people that are getting these certifications are really kind of taking that to heart and are even using it as marketing material in a way. Right now where I live not too far away from a hockey rink that is a big central point of the area. And you drive past and on their billboard, we are now well certified, just kind of like plastered up there. So it's definitely something that in this day and age, especially with current consumer sentiments on air quality, having that assurance there is definitely going to be driving a lot of people to these places more and more. And even just going off of like a Honeywell study that I read originally, I think it said 65% of workers 65% of the people surveyed are genuinely considering leaving their work based on poor office conditions. So it's something that is across the board kind of driving consumer sentiments.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw that study too. And we've seen similar ones from one of our customers, Steelcase. They're the big furniture manufacturer. They surveyed 32,000 office workers about the return to office, which is a hot topic these days. And 74% of them said that air quality is their number one concern with respect to return to office, right? And so if you want your employees to be innovative again, to collaborate, together, because there are benefits of in-person, you have to, both from a scientific perspective, keep the air clean so people don't get sick, but also from a psychological perspective, right? Like you're talking about, give them that peace of mind that it's okay to come back, that this employer cares about you, right? And the proof is in the pudding. One of our fastest growing areas is actually in the occupier side. Basically, they want to bring their employees back, but they want to be responsible about it. They want to project confidence, but it's got to be backed by science, right? It can't just be like I slapped a label on here and then everyone's good. Like we actually put both our monitoring technology that shows actual data as well as our purification products and whatnot to clean air as needed, right? And together that both scientifically helps and psychologically also gives people confidence.
So I think it's great that like more people are talking about air quality, especially on a consumer level, because that's definitely driving a lot of action from businesses as a whole. But I still feel like there's a lot that people kind of like to focus on where they should be looking at a much broader picture. In the case of a lot of strategies surrounding air quality, most of it still seems to kind of relate to COVID and VOCs. And so I was wondering, considering you have the entire product that's dedicated to breaking down the different types of pollutants in the air, what are some of the other pollutants people or just other aspects of air quality that people should be, focusing on?
Yeah, so I have 2 food points on that. Number one, there is a much more comprehensive world of air quality that people should pay attention to. So, in addition to call it the traditional metrics, people are measuring CO2, for example, as a proxy for ventilation. They're measuring TVOC, which is a super broad category of really anything that's I'll just use the acronym volatile organic compound. It could be perfume, it could be benzene, which is carcinogen, it could be formaldehyde, which is similarly not very good for you. It could be particles, which could be generally expressed as, again, the PM 2.5 or PM 10 by size, but it could also, that itself breaks down into large particles, which could be pollen, mold, or small particles like aerosols that could transmit disease, right? Or smog that's, from industrial processes or even wildfires. So we want to basically capture that more comprehensive set of information for people. However, our other viewpoint, though, is we have to deliver that information to people in a way that doesn't require them to be an expert in environmental sciences, right? That doesn't require them to look at charts all day long. So we view our work as doing the homework for them, right? So we'll monitor all these things, but we're not just going to regurgitate that to you. And I think one of the mistakes with the industry in the last 10 years, maybe before COVID and even up to now, they just regurgitate information. So, you have a monitor that instead of two sensors, they have 10. And they show you all that data from all 10 sensors. And for the average office manager, for the building owner, for even the homeowner, they have no idea what to do with it, right? They would have to get like a master's degree in, chemistry and environmental sciences just to know what's going on. And so we basically see ourselves as doing that homework. We'll read OSHRI 62.1 and what the guidance is from CDC and environmental science textbooks. That's what we've been doing the last few 7 years, really, to really turn that data into actionable recommendations, alerts, better yet, automation. So rather than say, hey, the recommendation is for you to get better ventilation. Well, if you were to make that even better for the customer, just change it, right? Turn it higher, and turn it down when you don't need to. And you can tell them later, look, I saved you energy, or I made you healthier by this much. Like, I think that people appreciate that. So yes, definitely more data is needed, because it does provide more root solutions, that could be products or services. But we want to digest that for them so they don't have to do all that hard work.
And now, I guess one of the questions that I wanted to ask too, before we sort of close up, is that for building managers, facility owners, and even for like professionals within just the either the commercial space or the residential space, because this is something that integrators, like custom home integrators, are starting to get in on now too, in a lot of cases, considering they're the ones that are mainly dealing with all of these technological integrations within a home. For those people, what are some of the things they should be making sure they're paying attention to keep that air quality, to keep that indoor air a lot safer for people?
Yeah, so we think that our products, by being more comprehensive, it can provide for a more proactive approach to helping manage a building or a home. So for instance, if we detect mold, then it should be very targeted, right? You bring in the company or the pro to come to the home and actually look for that mold, right? Because it is fluorescing in our sensors in a certain way. We think it's there, but obviously to get rid of it, you can't just ventilate that way. You might need a person to come in, and this industry around these facility managers, these pros, they sometimes are very reactionary. And if it's so bad that it's obvious, then the homeowner will go call somebody, right? If there's a smell, if there's people are getting sick already, then okay, then you call somebody. And then in the meantime, these people who are trying to service buildings and homes, they're kind of blind in that they're just sort of calling everybody. That's why when you open your coupon book and there's like a lot of mailers, like inevitably 2 or 3 of those are from some AJAC pro who's volunteering to clean your duct or replace something or renovate something. This happens in the commercial space too. We think if you project forward 5, 10 years down the road, and we're talking about smart buildings, then it will become so obvious that these buildings should self-diagnose what's going on, right? And say, I have a mold problem. My chiller is emanating, biomaterial because it's gunked up with, bacteria and other things. Let's call somebody in there, right? Or we have a ventilation problem. We need somebody to come in and actually, open up the ventilation system so we can bring more fresh outside air, right? That should be proactive, not this reactionary thing. And so I feel like we're kind of in that middle of that by generating the right information, right? More specific information. 5, 10 years later, people will look back and I think really be surprised that for so many years, for really the entire history of buildings, like all we measured was temperature, right?
Yeah.
Like people, it will just become so surprising. Like, why did we do it like that? Obviously, it's maybe cheaper to do that, but like health is such an important part, and even property risk, right? It's such an important part. And now sensors and analytics are available at a reasonable cost to be able to make every home and every building much more responsive, right? And I think that's better for everyone.
Yeah, I think as you were saying, that it's definitely a lot has happened to really drive down the price of a lot of monitoring software for people, so that it's even in the range, it's in the purchasing range of most homeowners now. It's kind of always been in that purchasing range for commercial spaces a lot, because that's sort of something they've had to focus on a lot more, especially recently. But yeah, just being able to have kind of a more proactive approach to it, I think, is going to be incredibly important, especially based off of the A&M study, where there's a great big emphasis being placed on that kind of early intervention in these spaces, so that you're looking at this sort of you're looking at the conditions and you're monitoring for them before issues start to come about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think being proactive is good for people's health. It's actually good for business too, because those people who are trying to sell you that new HVAC system or renovate your system or upgrade it, they're looking for who needs help. And just like with our study, right, in Las Vegas, it's not every building that needed help. They could more, I think, efficiently target those if they knew that these homes or these buildings actually were not that good, right?
That's
so
actually a good point. Yeah, it's actually a really good point. So it was great getting a chance to talk with you. I was really glad for you to make time for the podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close out?
I guess our last point, or maybe my last point, is we really think that indoor air quality has always been important, but it's really been brought to the forefront in the last few years for a few reasons. One is obviously the pandemic, and there's also wildfires in general. But we're really happy that we can be helpful in this industry, and hopefully take a leadership position to help people better understand and then take action, right? Take the right action. And I think that's good for people's health. That's good for businesses and society to come back. That's good for all the partners and all the companies in this industry to better service their customers. And so hopefully it's a win-win-win for everyone. And if anybody would like more information, they can go to our website at wynd.ai to learn more. And Nick, thank you so much for this opportunity and for the time to chat.